Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the Grit Live Post Race Show. We were treated to an exciting weekend of racing. I'm Kobe Lambert from the PodiumFinish.net, and with me, as always, Joe Samniego. And yesterday, we said in Formula One we might see something that we've never seen before. And after watching that race, I definitely saw a lot of things that I've never seen before, and a lot of other things that I've never imagined seeing in Formula One. The almost oval at the Bahrain outer circuit felt like an oval race due to all of the excitement and craziness that happened. And we'll start with Joe to recap the Sakhir Grand Prix.
It was a race that definitely left everyone talking. And by far, I would say overall, it was one of the most 2020 shocking moments we've seen in Formula One. Race winner, Sergio Perez. He was involved in a crash on lap one. Contact from Charles Leclerc spun him around, took Leclerc, Max Verstappen out of the race. He was last on the restart on lap seven. That one gave him 80 laps. 80 laps, came through the field to earn his first Formula One win. However, no doubt Mercedes threw away any chance at a victory during the second pit stops. Mercedes made a late call during the safety car to pit both drivers. A radio issue has caused some serious confusion between the pit crew, the mechanics. So essentially, when George Russell came in for his pit stop, they had a mix of Valtteri Bottas tires, his tires. By the time he left, Bottas came in, a slower stop as they realized the mistake when they realized they didn't have the correct tires. And essentially, this put Bottas, Russell from first, second, fourth, fifth. And then, of course, Russell was now behind Bottas, who was back on the same old tires that were 26 laps old. Did Mercedes really need to make that pit stop at the end, or was that too ambitious of a move by Mercedes?
To keep things simple, I'm just gonna say that Mercedes flat out screwed up. They screwed the race for the entire team there. It looked like George Russell's gonna run away with this and win his very first Formula One race, and unfortunately, due to several issues, it didn't happen. And Valtteri Bottas was put in a really bad position by the team with this confusion. And like it's like, come on, Mercedes, this stuff should not happen at all because we know what this team is capable of, and it's really surprising to me to see Mercedes make such a horrible mistake here and cause serious confusion for the pit crews because it just absolutely destroyed the race for both teams. It kind of reminded me of the time when it looked like Daniel Ricciardo was going to win the Monaco Grand Prix at Red Bull, and then he pitted and the tires weren't ready, and end up ruining his race.
It does remind me of that time, and it really shows how important it is for all these teams to just be 100% perfect the entire race weekend, and especially in the race. This move has been done by Mercedes time and time again. Yes, there was some radio issue that they said that caused confusion. I just really feel like, okay, there was no other way of communicating once they realized, hey, we don't think that radio message went through. And it really did mess up this race for both of them. Especially when we look at third, fourth place, Lance Stroll, Esteban Ocon, they didn't make a pit stop. Had they stayed out, yeah, there's always that risk that you two of you stayed out. Maybe somebody's going to make a pit stop. But the way it looked, this was just a move to try to really be what they call a safe pit stop, just to ensure the tires were good and fresh for the end. And it totally backfired and just ruined both drivers' races. George Russell, of course, he had a great start, took the lead. He really looked like Lewis Hamilton out there today. After that botched pit stop, came up to second place. Looked like he was going to try to chase down Sergio Perez towards the end of the race. But then a punctured tire resulted in him having to come back into pit road, make a pit stop because of the 58-second lap times, 56-second lap times by the time we got to this point in the race. He fell way out of the points, managed to salvage a ninth place finish, score his first points in Formula One. Now, the race stewards were investigating Mercedes due to the issue of the pit stop mix-up. There was no points penalty towards George Russell, however, a monetary fine for Mercedes. Did George Russell exceed expectations today? And how painful has it been to have you don't have the results to show how dominant you were today at the track?
Oh, George Russell absolutely exceeded all expectations. For him to come out there and flat out beat Valtteri Bottas in terms of pace and everything that happened in the race, I think that's huge. And I know a lot of people have been saying and telling me as well that hey, it's just the car. The car is as good as say you put anybody in that car and it can go out and go out and win. However, that's not necessarily true all the time. Yeah. You can probably put a driver who's probably not as talented as Lewis Hamilton in a car, just maybe about one or two steps below, and they can go out there and win in a Mercedes. But if you put a driver who's like maybe 5 or 6 levels below Lewis Hamilton, they're probably not going to go out there and win in a Mercedes. Probably going to be a disappointing situation where they're struggling just to finish inside the points or not finishing the points at all. And and we've seen in George Russell all his success in GP3, Formula Two, winning championships. We know what George Russell is capable of, and he's been maximizing his Williams towards the back of the grid and doing everything he can to extract maximum performance out of that car. And now that George Russell had an opportunity to drive a top tier Formula One car, I th- I think we're seeing a lot of potential out of George Russell at the Formula One level. And I did see a comment on Twitter. Somebody said to make me laugh. He said George Russell making this race boring in reference to the early portions of the race when Russell was starting to run away with it. And then the comment after that, after saying George Russell making this race boring, they said this is something we're probably going to be hearing about for many years to come in Formula One.
Great point. As we mentioned yesterday on Grid Live pre-race, the way George Russell came out, especially free practice 1, free practice 2, he almost looked like Lewis Hamilton. Today, he was on the dirty side of the track for the start. Great start, had the lead by the first corner and was really pulling away, especially after we saw Bottas sliding out of turn 2, turn 3. That stacked up everybody behind him. Easily, if we didn't have that first lap incident, I think we would have been talking about George Russell getting out of DRS range of second place and just controlling the race. And all race long, 2 second, 3 second, one point even a 4 second lead over Bottas. For him to come into that car, literally wasn't designed for him, complaining about foot pains just because of the difference in size. Even in the race, talking to the crew, asking about the different buttons for the different functions of that car. He really proved how great of a driver he is. And definitely, I think it's going to be one of those things where it has to be agonizing for him. But one of the big things I think is he did everything right. What happened in the pit stop was beyond his control, beyond Mercedes' control if it was an issue with the radio. And then, of course, a punctured tire easily could have been the debris that we saw from the crash earlier from the Williams. Social media, it was all over the place during this race. Of course, we saw plenty of passing, lots of on-track action, the fast lap times. Pit stops were really critical. We saw how Daniel Kvyat, that 2.4 second pit stop, got him around Pierre Gasly, got him around Daniel Ricciardo. We saw how the pit stop for Esteban Ocon was faster than Lance Stroll, got him around Lance Stroll, and Lance Stroll could never get around him again. And then the range of emotions I think everyone's feeling after that race with Sergio Perez, George Russell, the shock of Mercedes having this cosmic screw up. It really feels like something after a NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega. The emotions are everywhere. This was definitely a roller coaster of an event. Did the Almost Oval live up to the hype?
Yes, the Almost Oval lived up to the hype, and I think it really exceeded expectations by far. It was so crazy, and I like the analogy you used there. It really did feel like a NASCAR race at Talladega in terms of unpredictability. Had no idea who was going to win this Grand Prix, and in that final restart when Sergio Perez was out front and George Russell was chasing, and as soon as George Russell was able to get up to second, I'm like, well, Sergio Perez, you're gonna get passed by George Russell within a few laps, and then saw Russell make that pit stop. I think he said he had a puncture on the radio. I believe, and then when that happened, I said Sergio Perez is gonna win this race. Oh my goodness, I did not wake up this morning thinking that we'd see a Sergio Perez victory today, but but considering his long Formula One career that he's had so far, and all of the obstacles he's been through, it was definitely worth the wait for Sergio Perez. And then the last question you asked before this, forgot to answer about how painful it was for George Russell only finishing ninth place considering how strong he ran. I think yeah, it was definitely painful for George there because I saw I'm sure a lot of people saw the photos after the race on social media. George was lying down on the ground looking absolutely dejected, and then mentioned later on that he called his parents afterward, and after speaking with his parents, he started to feel a lot better, and that just shows the authentic human side of things because I know when I've been in tough situations or experienced a defeat in my life, when I talk to my mom on the phone, I feel better, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And I think that's what really draws in fans to these racing drivers because they're authentic and relatable.
Yeah, definitely. I know when it comes to George Russell, everyone on social media was heartbroken for him. Of course, we all know the story. He hasn't scored points. He's been with Williams, come close a couple times to scoring points, but hasn't. Today, it's interesting because if he was in the Williams and he got this ninth place finish, easily everyone will be applauding, cheering. George Russell will be over the moon. But knowing the opportunity he had with Mercedes, how controlling he was in that race. Like I said a couple times in the show, he really looked like Lewis Hamilton, just putting the distance from Valtteri Bottas, just not letting up on him, taking care of everything. And then to not have it all work out his way, it is tough. And it was definitely something where the race definitely lived up to the hype. I think some people anticipated it'll be a lot more passing. We saw the passing, not on the level where I think some people anticipated. The slipstream was really powerful, especially that first lap and the restarts. We saw Carlos Sainz getting around Valtteri Bottas. Of course, coming out of turn 2 to turn 3, he went off track, gave up their position again, and then the Mercedes was able, with that clean air, to pull away. It was something where I know we're using a lot of NASCAR terminology, comparing it to Talladega restrictor plate track, where there's just a big mix of emotion. And that's why, for me, is the big draw about motorsports. The glory of winning, Sergio Perez, first career victory in Formula One. Everyone's excited about him, but it comes at the expense of George Russell, the agony of defeat, and then all the emotions in between. This was just something where this is a race I think we're definitely going to remember for a long time. Of course, George Russell, he's going to remember this for a long time, but definitely Sergio Perez earning his win. This is going to be probably the number one memory unless he gets more wins in the future. And especially considering how his race started, first lap in trouble with Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, fell back to 18th, last on that restart, worked his way up front. He stayed on those hard tires. All right. Seems like we had a little bit of technical difficulties. Do you think Perez saved his career by securing a possible 2021 ride with his win today?
Oh yeah, I definitely think that Sergio Perez potentially saved it. He potentially saving his Formula One career right now, and there's really only one realistic option right now for him on the grid, and that's a second seat at Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen. And I hate to say it for all the Alex Albon fans out there, but I think Sergio Perez's victory today might be the nail in the coffin for Alex Albon at Red Bull. Because now with Sergio Perez getting a win, it's really crazy to think that Sergio Perez is going to be a Formula One race winner in 2020 and not even be on the grid in 2021. Yeah, and he's showing, even with that, the fastest car, even considering everything that happened with Mercedes, Sergio Perez can go out there and win. And we all know the Racing Point car has definitely shown up and shown out a lot this year, and that's exactly what Sergio Perez did today. And honestly, I think Red Bull would be really foolish not to offer Sergio Perez a contract. And I know it'd be very uncharacteristic for Red Bull to go outside of his driver development program that it has, but they want to be contending with Mercedes in the constructors championship, and they need a little bit more consistency with both drivers finishing up there in the points. If they're not beating Mercedes, they need to be right up there next to him. And I think Sergio Perez could give them the consistency that had been lacking with Alex Albon.
And the consistency, Perez has scored points in every race he has entered. Of course, he did miss a couple races when he tested positive for COVID-19, but every time he has just been always scoring points. Of course, the one exception last race weekend, he was on track to a podium finish, and then the engine let go. So that is the one exception. Every other race, though, scoring points, scoring points. So definitely, I think he's really showing that he is capable of winning. And now, too often we talk about this. Once a driver gets that first win, that confidence is really up high. The nerves of I'm trying to get my first wins now out of the way. It's let's go out there, win another race. And definitely, I think that's going to be really strong for him and Racing Point entering next weekend. You mentioned about the consistency. Red Bull, after a double podium last week, clearly a disappointing race. Max was out on lap one, really nowhere to go. There's a victim circumstances with Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez making that contact. Alex Albon started 12th, finished 6th place, not really a factor. In fact, Sergio Perez put a really good pass on him to get around and continue his march to the front. And today, many were critical of Valtteri Bottas' performance today. Had the pole, didn't have the greatest start, could have easily fallen behind Verstappen, Perez, but of course we know what happened, exited a long straight. And then with everything that occurred, he just was nowhere near George Russell's performance. Is Bottas in the same group as Alex Albon? Does he belong in the group of drivers that have their seat under a lot of scrutiny?
After the race, George Russell did say he hoped to make Toto Wolff's job a lot harder in 2022, and with today's performance, despite despite everything that fell apart for Russell today, I think he's definitely gonna make Toto's job a lot harder in 2022 when deciding the driver lineup. And definitely was a disappointing day for Valtteri Bottas. And we did discuss yesterday on Grid Live pre-race that Valtteri was going to be under a lot of pressure to show what he can do without Lewis Hamilton on the team and him being the experienced driver in the Mercedes, showing that on his best day he can go out there and be the leader for the team. But today George Russell absolutely blew him out of the water. A driver who doesn't have a lot of experience in this Mercedes Formula One car, and I don't think this is going to be a good look for Valtteri Bottas moving forward. And 2022 is really going to be an interesting year. You have Valtteri scheduled to return to Mercedes next year, and Lewis Hamilton doesn't have the contract yet, but it would surprise me if they didn't get that done soon. But looking ahead towards the future, I think George Russell is definitely going to be driving for Mercedes full time in the foreseeable future, and for Valtteri Bottas, that doesn't sound good at all. I do think that he belongs in the group of drivers that's going to be under a lot of pressure moving forward, just the same as Alex Albon. And with Sergio Perez winning today, I think Dr. Helmut Marko is going to have to make some tough decisions soon.
Yeah, tough decisions, and especially with Bottas, George Russell during that race was asking questions about the buttons, the setups. You've been learning this car all weekend. This should have easily been Valtteri Bottas' race to show I could lead this team. I could be the number one. He has the same mechanic, the same garage, whereas Russell and that team, they were just learning everything, trying to work together, build that chemistry. The start didn't go great for Valtteri Bottas. The race pace, nothing to what we were seeing. He did get some fastest laps in. He did at one point was slowly catching, but could never really mount a serious charge to George Russell. I do see him being on the hot seat, especially what's going to happen in Abu Dhabi. If Lewis Hamilton's back, of course, Lewis Hamilton's going to be a favorite to win. If Lewis Hamilton's not back, if we see George Russell in there or another driver, if they outperform Valtteri Bottas, now I think we're going to have a bigger discussion, because whereas some folks would say, well, this was a unique track. This is a track nobody ever ran in a Formula One car. Not the case with Abu Dhabi. So I definitely think Valtteri Bottas might be under some more pressure, especially next year, 2021, a one-year deal. And you got George Russell there, who just really showed he could have easily taken the win today with his Mercedes debut. Now, last week, we talked about Racing Point, how they were in trouble. We were talking about how we saw Lance Stroll, he ended up upside down. Sergio Perez on track to get a podium, engine failed. We were talking about they just lost third place in the constructors. Can they respond back? They must have watched our show because it seemed like they were just really motivated because they responded with their first double podium. We talked about how they just can never seem to get that done. Well, they did it today. Third place with Lance Stroll and a win. They are now third in the constructors, and it's coming down to the next race weekend at Abu Dhabi. And what's really interesting in the post race, Carlos Sainz said they should have secured third place already. Did the momentum change? And now with a win, double podiums, Racing Point is now the team to beat for McLaren and Renault.
Yeah, it seems like Racing Point is definitely the team to beat now. Today was just a remarkable day for the entire team with Sergio Perez winning his very first Formula One Grand Prix, then having Lance Stroll take the bottom step at a podium, and just in general, the podium we saw today was just wild with Sergio standing on the top, then Esteban Ocon second place, and Lance Stroll third place. And I saw something funny on Twitter this evening, showing the Formula One graphic they created of Perez, Ocon, and Stroll, and saying, what would you do if you had taken an afternoon nap and logged on to Twitter after you woke up and saw this podium? Would you even believe it? Because it was definitely such an unpredictable podium, and it's just showing that there's going to be a lot of better days ahead in Formula One as we were seeing a lot more parity, and hopefully it'll continue well into the future.
Very likely will continue in the future, especially when we have the 2022 car out. I think that's going to be a really big game changer. One of the things that's really interesting with this podium, of course, Sergio Perez, teammate Lance Stroll. Not too long ago, it was Esteban Ocon, his teammate at Racing Point in the pink vehicle. So it's really interesting podium finish. Now we saw there. Definitely, I think Racing Point is going to have the momentum entering next week. Double podium. They control their destiny now for third place. It's no longer we need to catch up. It's we need to go out there, run our race like we did this past weekend, and we could do that. Next weekend, the season finale at Abu Dhabi. Battle for third place will be the big talking point. McLaren Racing Points. That's going to be really fun. We'll be waiting to see if Lewis Hamilton returns. Of course, it was announced Roman Grosjean will not be at Abu Dhabi. Unfortunately, he will not be at a track, so his Formula One career comes to a rather unfortunate end. But definitely, of course, everyone was just so thrilled to have him at the racetrack this weekend and to see him again. And of course, we're definitely going to be excited to know that he'll be back with his family again. This is definitely shaping up to be a very memorable 2020 Formula One season.
Yeah, definitely very memorable, and like you mentioned, it's such a shame that Roman Grosjean is not going to get one final time to race in Formula One because this might have been his last time ever racing in Formula One. We don't know if he's ever going to make it back, but Toto Wolff and Mercedes did offer to do an off-season test with Roman, so he in one of their Formula One cars, so he could get a proper Formula One send-off by driving the fastest car in the grid, and I hope that we'll be able to see that happen because considering everything that Romans went through with this horrible crash at Bahrain and also the recovery process, I think that'll definitely be a satisfying end to his Formula One career if it's indeed the final time. And while you were talking about memorable seasons, there was a memorable race that took place in Pensacola, Florida today. It was the 53rd running of the Snowball Derby, which got underway shortly after 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. local time. The race got moved up an hour due to potential rain later in the day. From pole position, Derek Thorne dominated the first half of the race. Meanwhile, Bubba Pollard, one of the top short track racers in the country, got lapped and struggled with speed, and he ended up just taking the car to the infield and calling it a day, retiring from the race. It was definitely been a terrible weekend for Bubba Pollard all around. Last night, all the talk was about the controversial finish of the Snowflake 100 late model race. Bubba Pollard was leading on the final lap, entering 3 and 4 for the final time until he got the bump and run from Stephen Nasse, which sent Pollard spinning, and he lost the race that many thought he had won. And following the heartbreak from last night and the slow car today getting lapped in the very early goings, is it safe to say that everything went wrong for Bubba Pollard this weekend?
Yeah, it seemed everything went wrong. And just one of those deals where it seems like, especially when it comes to racing, things will start off right. One thing goes wrong, you still plan to do your best, but that momentum has gone away and just seemed like for Bubba Pollard, everything that just could go wrong didn't go his way at all. And definitely encourage everyone to chat room, especially you watch the Snowball Derby. Tell us what you think, because definitely this was a memorable race, except for Bubba Pollard. He doesn't want to remember this weekend at all.
Yeah, definitely. This will be a weekend that Bubba Pollard will want to forget for a very long time because it was definitely not enjoyable or memorable for him. And next, Chase Elliott and Chandler Smith progressed well from the back of the field, cracked the top 10 before the halfway mark in such a competitive field of talented drivers. Derek Thorne continued leading well into into the final half of the race. Stephen Nasse and Chandler Smith looking like potential challengers for the win. And speaking of Nasty, he was another driver who has had a terrible weekend. Last night, he took the checkered flag, and we all saw him celebrate winning the Snowflake 100. Then, right after he started soaking up the win, it was announced that he got penalized for aggressive driving due to the incident with Bubba Pollard, and the victory was taken away from him within the last year. We've seen him lose both the Snowflake 100 and the Snowball Derby, and he was running second in the Snowball Derby earlier today until he ran into some mechanical issues that forced him to retire from the race, promoting Ty Majeski to second place. And in the closing laps, race leader Derek Thorne was starting to struggle with grip. This allowed Majeski to close the gap and apply pressure to Thorne. And right before the competition caution, at almost 20 laps to go, Majeski gave Thorne a little nudge to his bumper and took the lead. All drivers came to pit road for the last time for any final adjustments. Chase Elliott moved up to third, and we even saw Bubba Pollard go up to Chase and chat with him under the yellow. For any driver who has never won the Snowball Derby before and in position to potentially win, what's going through your mind sitting on pit road as you prepare for a dash to the finish?
So much going through your mind. Definitely, of course, in this level of racing, the local short tracks, a win like this is huge for your career. This isn't just the usual Saturday night short track where we're lucky if the local newspaper talks about it. This is an event where you got Kyle Busch, you got Chase Elliott, you have streaming coverage of it worldwide. People are going to be talking about this. Your name's going to be up there as a winner of a historic event, the 53rd running of the Snowball Derby. Has to be a lot going through your mind. And of course, it is the big challenge of the driver. You don't want to start getting lost in the thought of, okay, I'm going to win this race. You got to focus on hitting your marks, staying in the groove, looking for grip if you can, taking care of those tires, all that stuff. Don't start thinking too far ahead. This is a big race. Once you cross the finish line, that let us soak in. But definitely under this caution, it was just something where it's like, man, there's a lot going through his head, especially knowing Chase Elliott wasn't that far behind.
Yeah, definitely. I can't imagine what was going through the mind of those drivers who never won the Snowball Derby and sit on pit road thinking like, wow, all I have to do is hit my marks and stay out of trouble, and I can go out here and win this. And winning the Snowball Derby is such a special honor since it's one of the greatest crown jewels in short track racing all across the country. And definitely, I'm sure those drivers were feeling the pressure that's sitting there. But as soon as the green flag dropped with 15 laps to go, they were on it again, and then Ty Majeski on the restart cleared Derek Thorne for the lead. Then we got a caution for a wreck, and then ran under caution for a little while and went back to green with less than 5 laps to go. Majeski and Thorne were just beating and banging all over one another, and it was just this epic short track racing, the type of show you'll see, and in my opinion, definitely worth every penny. In the end, ultimately, Ty Majeski took the checkered flag and won the 53rd running of the Snowball Derby. Majeski's car went through the room of doom post-race inspection with Ricky Brooks without any issues. And looking at the rest of the top 10 finishers, Derek Thorne finished second, Chase Elliott third, Chandler Smith fourth, Caden Honeycutt fifth, Cole Butcher was sixth, Kyle Busch seventh, Grant Enfinger eighth, Derek Griffith ninth, and Kyle Plott rounds out the top 10. Going back to Ty Majeski for a second, we've seen him experience plenty of success on the local short tracks and late models all across the country. He's won championships, many races, and major races too. Now he has the Snowball Derby on his resume. And despite his successful racing career so far, we really haven't seen him take off in NASCAR yet. He had a disappointing 2020 season in the NASCAR Truck Series with Nice Motorsports, and actually got replaced in the number 45 Chevrolet Silverado he was driving late in the year and didn't finish out the season. How does winning the Snowball Derby make up for such a difficult race? And do you think we'll ever see him find some stability in NASCAR?
It'll be really interesting. I'll be sort of surprised if he doesn't get a second opportunity in the NASCAR Truck Series or some sort of opportunity, whereas Xfinity race some point mid-season, especially at one of the short tracks. He really showed what he could do, especially today's race. Snowball Derby, such tough competition. It's such a huge event. Definitely, I see him earning an opportunity. And then, of course, when it comes to the short tracks this year, we know with the pandemic what it done to all the big series, NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar. For the short tracks, of course, it's even more dire. A lot of these local short tracks, much smaller budget. They couldn't afford a longer shutdown. So to say you won the 2020 Snowball Derby, I think really just makes it where, yeah, it's the shining moment of your racing career on the short tracks, getting that win, and hopefully propelling yourself to something bigger and better for 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I definitely think winning the Snowball Derby definitely makes up for such a difficult year in NASCAR for Ty Majeski because because he went to Nice Motorsports, the team that contended for the Truck Series Championship with Ross Chastain, and a lot of people thought that Ty Majeski was going to do the same, but unfortunately, it seemed like Nice Motorsports was down a two to three step this season, and they weren't as competitive as they were in the previous season. Yeah, yeah, and unfortunately, Ty Majeski mentioned he got replaced later in the year and didn't get to finish the season, which is really unfortunate for him because you look at Ty Majeski's resume on the short tracks, it's pretty impressive. He's definitely one of the top short track racers in the country, and and even if he's not able to find the stability in NASCAR, I think he'll be able to carve out a pretty impressive career on the short tracks. But I think after winning the Snowball Derby, anybody doubting him in NASCAR, he just reminded him that he's a pretty good race car driver.
Very good race car driver, very capable of going up into the NASCAR level. Definitely big congratulations to him on his Snowball Derby win. Another big congratulations, of course, going now to the brand new champion of World Rally Championship. Of course, the season finale was today, the Rally Monza. Of course, a very short season, very unexpected, of course, with the pandemic and everything. Final event of the weekend was really interesting. Elfyn Evans came in as the points leader. He had the lead, but then Saturday, under snowy condition, he crashed out. His big rival, when it came to the championship, Sebastian Ogier, he had the lead. All he had to do was win the race or outscore him by essentially 15 points. And he got it done. Elfyn Evans finished 26th today. Sebastian Ogier cruised to victory at the Rally Monza. He is now a 7-time World Rally Championship champion in 8 years. Just amazing how well he has been in World Rally Championship week in and week out, and the different conditions. Of course, Rally Championship racing, tarmac, mud, dirt. This weekend, snow, very snowy condition, and today was really rainy. We saw Jay. He really showed the caliber of driver he is to go out there and take that win. What are your initial, essentially, when it comes to Sebastian Ogier winning 7 championships in 8 years? That's just really impressive, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. It just shows Sebastian Ogier has a lot of hardware at home, and he's definitely the caliber driver who can go out there and get it done in every rally. And wow, seven championships in 8 years. That's very impressive for Sebastian Ogier to go out there. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of heartbreak for Elfyn Evans because we thought this was going to be his championship to win. Elfyn Evans has been doing really well in the grid ranking as well this season, and for him to crash out and go out this way when it really looked like that it was going to be the year for Elfyn Evans to win the WRC championship, but in 2020 it just wasn't meant to be.
Wasn't meant to be. I mean, to come in with the points lead, he was pushing it really hard. Was pushed a little too hard, slid off course, went into the ditch. Of course, the snowy conditions, unfamiliar track where the drivers, the teams, of course, they have their nose and everything, but of course, it's so much different once you're behind the vehicle and pushing the gas pedal and sliding that vehicle all around. Of course, this year was a much shorter World Rally Championship season, only 7 races. We had 5 different winners. Evans and OJ both won 2 races each. Not really in contention for the grid ranking at all due to the shorter season, and we had 5 different winners in 7 races. This, of course, was the second season of World Rally Championship in the grid ranking.
Yeah, speaking of the grid ranking, week 31 of the grid ranking shows Lewis Hamilton in the lead with the score unchanged. And since he didn't take part in the Formula One race weekend, he's in charge with the DNS did not start. Of course, with the missed race, he has clinched the grid ranking world championship. Joe Lewis Hamilton, the 2020 grid ranking world champion. Where does he rank with the other 2 world champions of Martin Truex Jr. and Marc Marquez?
I would definitely say when it comes to the past grid ranking world champions, last year, Marc Marquez, with all the wins and podiums he had, he ranks up there. Of course, when we look at the scores, this year, right now, Lewis Hamilton has a 2013. Marc Marquez was the only grid ranking world champion to end with a score over 20. The first year of the grid ranking, Martin Truex Jr., 8 wins. He got a lot of top 10 finishes, won it over Marc Marquez. Lewis Hamilton this year, he's just been in another league of his own, just dominant week in and week out. The competition, of course, Max Verstappen, Valtteri Bottas, week in and week out, they've always been there. And Mercedes, I know this is ironic, we're saying this, week in and week out are usually perfect. And even when they're not perfect, remember the 70th anniversary Grand Prix when Valtteri Bottas' tires blew up. Lewis Hamilton managed to take care of those tires, blew up on the last lap, finished with 3 tires full of air and 1 flat. Turkish Grand Prix managed to take care of those tires, win that race and his 7th championship. Lewis really showed he is the best in the world for 2020.
And in 2017 and 2019, Lewis Hamilton finished 3rd in the grid ranking. In 2018, 6th place finish. Lewis is always in the top 10 each and every year. Assuming Lewis Hamilton is back with Mercedes and knows that Marc Marquez is out at potentially 3 to 4 races, and Scott McLaughlin going to IndyCar, who could potentially beat Lewis Hamilton in 2021.
That's going to be really interesting to see who could beat him next year in 2021. Of course, Scott McLaughlin going to IndyCars. IndyCars traditionally is such a competitive series. We have multiple different winners. This year, Scott Dixon, of course, started out pretty strong. Towards the end of the season, he faded, so he started falling back to 6th place. So for Scott McLaughlin, he's going to have to really have a really good season, but he has some stiff competition there, especially with Scott Dixon, Joseph Newgarden. Both of them finish in the top 10. Marc Marquez, of course, if he's going to miss those 3 to 4 races, assuming from the healing of his surgery, not likely going to get charged, did not start. So he has to come out really strong. He did in 2019, winning just about every race, getting a podium almost every race. He'll need something like that to really contend for the grid ranking. The one name that I could see in the top 10 that I could see a potential challenge for Lewis Hamilton is NASCAR driver Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick this year, 9 wins. If you can increase that consistency, I see him being a potential spoiler for Lewis Hamilton's effort to get 2 grid ranking world championships in a row.
And that's an interesting choice of Kevin Harvick. And towards the end of 2020 season, his number 4 team kind of went into a slump, and they fell off their form as the season neared its end. And heading into 2021, it's going to be interesting to see if Kevin Harvick and his team can rediscover the form that they had for most of the 2020 season. And if they come out like that in 2021 like they did this year, I definitely believe that Kevin Harvick could challenge Lewis Hamilton for the grid ranking world championship. And while the 2020 grid ranking world championship has been decided, the grid ranking in general isn't over yet. We still have 1 more week remaining, and we'll have the final grid ranking standings next Sunday on Grid Live post race. And don't forget about the grid World Motorsport League, Lewis Hamilton could become the first driver to win both the Grid World Motorsport League and the Grid ranking as well, which concludes after next weekend.
Everything's concluding after next weekend. I know it's going to be a very exciting weekend at Abu Dhabi. Definitely going to be following everything. Of course, we also want to definitely give a big congratulations to Mick Schumacher for winning the Formula 2 championship with Prima. Definitely a big accomplishment. And of course, we all know Mick Schumacher is going to Formula 1 next year. Want to thank Colin, our Patreon supporter, for investing in the Grid Network, Grid Ranking, and World Motorsport League. You too could be part of this growing effort for more broadcasting of motorsports news, covering all the big stories. We're going to be on the air throughout the off season. Pretty short off season. January we'll be back again with IMSA and Formula E. Very excited for both of those events, and definitely encourage everyone to please like, subscribe, and comment on Grid Network videos. We love interacting with you, and definitely we want to do everything we can to bring you the best motorsports coverage. For Kobe Lambeth at the Podium Finish, my name is Joe Samaniego. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next time.